Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the apocalyptic Vaughn Manor. That's right, Roger. Today we're going to be talking about the end of civilization and the man who loved to destroy civilization. That's right. John Christopher destroys the world today in today's thrill-packed, adventure-filled video. So, who was this mysterious John Christopher, and why did he hate society so much that he kept destroying it over and over again? Well, it was this fella, John Christopher, who was actually San Yud, who lived from 1922 to 2012. I have the dates written down so I don't forget them, and yet I already screwed up. Anyway, this fella loved to destroy the world. He didn't do it under his own name because I guess if you're going to slaughter billions of people in your books, maybe you don't want to do it under your own name. Actually, John Christopher was the name that this fella used for his science fiction books. So yeah, he destroyed the world over and over again in his science fiction books. And I'm going to be talking about 3 of them today, starting with this one. This is actually The Death of Grass, which was released in 1956. In America, the title was changed inexplicably. America loved to change the titles of John Christopher books. Who knows why, but they did. So this is John Christopher's No Blade of Grass, which is actually The Death of Grass. This is the movie tie-in edition, I think. The science fiction classic, now an unforgettable motion picture. It's an unforgettable motion picture which we have all forgotten. But the book itself, once you read it, it is really hard to forget. I read this last year. One of the best books I read last year, if not the best book I read last year. I read it late last year. Dynamite book, man. No Blade of Grass, or The Death of Grass. This is one of those books you read it and it will always be on your mind. You will always think back to this book because it's a powerful book which examines just how quickly society could crumble under dire circumstances. And there's a dire circumstance here when we have a virus that affects and kills every form of grass that it comes across. Now that includes wheat. So it causes a great famine. And this book takes place in England. And in fact, the main characters of all 3 of our books are similar. They're not exactly the same, these fellas, but they're similar in that they are all middle class British guys who are basically decent people who live normal lives, who are now dealing with extreme situations. And this is an extreme situation. At the beginning of the book, all the people in England are seeing this virus affect other countries in the East, hoping it does not arrive to Britain, but it does, and causes a massive famine, and society just crumbles. So John Christopher had been in World War II. He was a soldier in World War II, and he had seen what happens and how quickly society can crumble under extreme situations and how people can change. And that definitely is something you see in this book. How quickly civilization just crumbles in this book is startling, and yet it all seems very realistic when you read it. It's also about how just normal, average people can change in such extreme situations and become completely ruthless when it comes to survival. So we have our main character in this book with his family and his best friend and his best friend's family, and they're trying to get out of the city and make their way to his brother's potato farm, which is isolated enough that it would be easily defendable, he believes, against people trying to invade. And society has moved to that point where, you would have to defend what you have violently. On the way, they pick up this guy who's a gun shop owner, who's this little guy, kind of an older guy, and he tags along with them. But it turns out that this little guy is a stone cold killer. He will kill without remorse. If he thinks you need to go, you're gone. And he's a crack shot. So in any other time, this guy would be a terrifying traveling companion, and he kind of is. But because he is what he is, a stone cold killer, he ends up being the MVP of this group. He is definitely the most valuable member of this group, which our hero realizes pretty quickly. That as scary as this guy is, they need him. And indeed, they end up doing some terrible things and for survival. And it's interesting. It's very British, this book. The way the characters interact and speak to each other. It's like, oh, rather too bad we had to shoot that woman in the face. Yes. Unfortunate, but one does what one must. It's that kind of thing. The whole stiff upper lip thing is very present in this, possibly because it was written in the 50s. But when characters do break down, that makes it all the more powerful. Riveting book. I highly recommend it. Definitely the best of the three that I'll be talking about. And it was a pretty successful book. It's a Penguin Classics now, I think. At least it's a Penguin Modern Classic. If you've not read this and you're interested in that kind of post-apocalyptic thing, or if you're just interested in science fiction, definitely give this a try. It's an excellent book. But John Christopher wasn't done destroying civilization. No, he felt the need to do it over and over again. And the second book I'll be talking about is this one, which is actually The World in Winter, which was released in 1962. America changed the title once again to The Long Winter. Who knows why? But this is The Long Winter. It has a very inaccurate science fiction-y cover. But it is about an ice age. So that's how John Christopher destroys civilization in this book. It is because of a new ice age. The sun is losing some of its power for a brief time, and so an ice age has arrived. And it's interesting because he does something different in this book. So the ice age affects all of Europe and causes a tremendous fight for survival in Europe. Again, we have another fight for survival. But what some of the British people do in this book is they see what's happening, and a lot of them get out. And our main character manages to do that and immigrates to Africa, where it's still warm. But this has caused a tremendous shift in the societies, in that now Africa is the wealthy nation. Africa has become a world power due to this situation here. And the Europeans are the immigrants who are fighting for menial jobs, while the Africans have become, like I said, rich. And at one point in this book, actually decide to send an expedition to Britain and colonize it. And our main character joins along with that expedition. It's really interesting. And this book, while probably the least of the three, my least favorite of the three, does have some of the best moments out of the three. There are some great scenes in this. It's a really fascinating book. It's interesting the way it's written too. There's a lot of time spent with our main character in the beginning of the book, and how his wife cheats on him with this other guy that's his friend. And I was like, why are they spending so much time in the beginning of this book on this guy's personal relationships? And I think it was partially, at least, because it shows that this guy's world was turned upside down even before the full destructive force of the Ice Age arrived. So it was an interesting way to do it. Really interesting book. Again, I highly recommend it. Not as good as The Death of Grass, but still a really, really good book. But again, John Christopher not done destroying things, so we also have to talk about this one. This is A Wrinkle in the Skin, which was released in 1965. Of course, America had to change it to the Ragged Edge. The Ragged Edge. And this cover is not great. Still available in print as A Wrinkle in the Skin, so you can get it that way. In this book, society is destroyed once again, but this time it's through tremendous earthquakes, which affect the entire planet. Like something shifts, and every spot on Earth has to deal with not just an earthquake, but tremendous earthquakes, which send shock waves across the world. And everything changes as far as the positions of the continents, and the island that this fella is on suddenly isn't an island anymore because all the water has been washed away to another area because it all shifted. Tremendous destruction. Billions of people die. And our hero on this island wants to get to the mainland. He wants to get back to Britain because his daughter is there. And there's always the chance that his daughter survived. She's all he has left in the world at the beginning of the story. And so he wants to get back. And so it becomes kind of an odyssey. It becomes a quest to find his daughter. Before he leaves, he ends up rescuing this kid. And this kid becomes very attached to him. And so he ends up with this new responsibility. But all along, even though this kid won't leave his side, he's thinking about his daughter and getting back to his daughter. And I have to say about this book is you do get really involved in this guy's quest. It is an emotionally involving book. Plot-wise, maybe not as interesting as The World in Winter, but I felt it was a better novel altogether with an interesting story because you do get involved in this guy's quest. And again, you stumble across all of the things you find in these kind of post-apocalyptic worlds. People battling for survival, joining in small groups. A lot of the things that you'll find later on in shows like The Walking Dead and other shows. I think the only reason John Christopher never destroyed the world with zombies is he just didn't think of it. He destroyed the world in every other way. But a lot of the things you find in stories like that, you originally found in books, like John Christopher's books. And the scene where he finally gets to Britain, and they walk because all the water has been washed away. So he's able to walk to Britain across what used to be the bottom of the sea. And it's a very dangerous journey, as you might expect. But he gets there, and the scene where he discovers the fate of his daughter, which I will not reveal, was just so well done and tremendously memorable. Excellent book. I have to say, John Christopher's a really good writer. You don't hear about him too much anymore. Some of his other books have survived as well, like The Tripods, famous YA science fiction series, I think is still talked about. and still read, I believe. But his post-apocalyptic destructive novels, definitely worth a read. And I guess that's all I have to say about it. Do you have anything more to say? Nothing from Roger today. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.